We do have a little bit of committee housekeeping, some new procedures that we need to make sure. So are we ready to go live? We're good. Okay. I need to announce that anyone presenting slides or sharing testimony must send all relevant files to audio-video requests at las.ks.gov with the correct committee in the subject. And if you are participating online, committee members, please utilize the hand raise function inside WebEx to request to speak. So a couple new housekeeping items. So. All right, committee, today we have a hearing on Senate Bill 347. We will start with an overview. And is that Charles or Dylan? Charles? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm going to just give a quick overview and let Commerce get into the weeds with respect to this bill. This comes to you from the Department of Commerce. SB 347 establishes a new economic development program. It's aimed at attracting large manufacturing or corporate headquarters projects, and the key there is a capital investment of at least $1 billion with respect to those primary projects. It also aims to promote the growth of a Kansas-based supply chain for that project. So Section 1 is a definition section, pages 1 to 5 of the bill. Of probably most important note there is a definition of qualified firm and qualified supplier. So both the qualified firm is the manufacturer or headquarters with a $1 billion requirement. The qualified supplier are suppliers that also are eligible for benefits under certain circumstances for that project. Basically, there is a distinction about what type of industry the manufacturing firm can be engaged in. That's limited to advanced manufacturing, aerospace, distribution, logistics, and transportation, food and agriculture, or professional and technical service. There's also some exclusions. Mining, swine production, ranching, or gaming are excluded. The headquarters project, though, may involve any business in any industry. And then Section 2, that's the primary section of the bill. It describes a program and eligibility requirements for qualified firms. There is that $1 billion investment that needs to be made within 5 years. There are a number of incentives for a qualified firm. They can be eligible for a refundable tax credit of up to income tax credit, or actually it also applies to the other taxes that Kansas issues against financial institutions or insurance companies, of up to 15% of the amount of the capital investment made in a year. There's a property tax exemption of 50% with some specifications, and we'll get to that later. A reimbursement of up to 15% of total payroll expense. Excuse me, I think that should be 10%. 10% of total payroll expense, and reimbursements of up to 50% of eligible education and training costs for new employees. And then there's also a sales tax exemption for construction of the facility. The investment tax credit is a little bit different maybe than some the committee has seen. It's earned in 1 year. So like, as I said, there's a $1 billion investment that needs to be made over a period of 5 taxable years. So the investment tax credit is based on the amount of the investment that is made each year. So in year 1, if the firm makes an investment of, $100 million, then 15% of that, up to 15% of that, that the Secretary has discretion within that regard. Up to 15% of that is eligible for as an earned tax credit. It can't be taken that year. It is taken the next 3 successive years. So it may be claimed within the next 3 successive years to the first year that it is earned. And that goes on for each year of the 5 years. So obviously there's going to be some stacking of credits along the way. But the credits are within that 3-year period, and they're divided into 3 equal portions. So in year 1, $100 million investment. Year 2, the firm can take $33 million of that. A percentage of that may be refundable, and that's also up to the discretion of the Secretary. The baseline is 50% of that credit may be refundable, up to 100% in the Secretary's discretion. So year 2, the firm first applies a credit against its tax liability. Anything left is refundable, and if there's anything left over that isn't refundable, and there's some credit left over of that first installment, then that can be carried forward within that 3-year period. So the 3-year period is kind of enclosed for each earned tax credit. At the end of the 3-year period, any credit that isn't used, from that earned credit of the first year is forfeit. Okay. So for eligibility for qualified suppliers, there are a couple of things that qualified suppliers have to do. One is they have to be, I'm sorry, sir?
We'll hold questions until Charles has given us the complete overview.
Well, I'd like to know where he's at in the bill.
Oh, okay.
If he's going through the bill, I'd like for him to keep us up to date on where he's at in the bill as he progresses along.
Okay. I apologize. I got sidetracked with giving you an explanation of the tax credit. All right. So I am discussing Section 2 of the bill. We'll get back to Section 2. Section 2 is pages 5 to 10.
Thank you, Charles.
So in Section 2, we have some eligibility requirements both for qualified firms and qualified suppliers. To be eligible, a qualified supplier has to be selected by the qualified firm as one of 5 that may be eligible for the benefits of this bill. In addition, the supplier has to meet an annual sales requirement to the manufacturing facility or the headquarters of at least $10 million a year. So if the qualified supplier meets those requirements and the other requirements of the Act, they can be eligible for the same benefits that are provided to the qualified firm, the manufacturer or the headquarters, including the investment tax credit, but there's no minimum investment requirement for the qualified supplier. And then there is also one other difference, which we'll get to later. Qualified firms, so like I said, they have to meet the eligibility requirements. There's also, for the qualified firm, there's a construction completion bond requirement if they don't meet a minimum investment rating that's set by the Secretary. They also, incentive recipients, they have to agree to an audit by the Secretary of Revenue, if requested by the Secretary of Commerce. They have to agree to provide information for purposes of the Department of Commerce's Economic Development Information Database. I'll just mention this now. When the Secretary exercises discretion, and you will see that the Secretary has discretion in determining the levels of benefits in this bill, there are a number of factors that the Secretary is to consider with respect to the benefits, and those are set out in Section 3 in the investment tax portion, but they're referenced throughout the bill. So those factors include the extent of prospective new employment, quality of new jobs and wage or salary levels, total amount of investment, potential for development of the respective industry in Kansas, the potential for ancillary industry development and indirect economic development, and the benefit to the local, regional, or state economy, including development of suppliers in Kansas. Okay, Section 3 sets out the investment tax credit, and that's what I was discussing previously. So again, the credit is allowable for each year based on the amount of the investment in that year. It's up to 15%. It's earned in that year, and then it's split up into 3 portions. One portion may be taken in the next successive taxable year, another portion in the second successive taxable year, the final portion in the third successive taxable year. There is a percentage of that credit that may be refundable after the credit is applied against any tax liability. That may range from 50 to 100% in the discretion of the Secretary. And then again, if there's a credit that's unused from that earned credit, that becomes forfeit at the end of that 3-year period of time. And the company must repay all tax credits received if the total capital investment is not completed. And again, that investment tax credit is also available to qualified suppliers. They meet the eligibility requirements, but there's no investment level requirement for qualified suppliers. Section 4 discusses the payroll withholding tax retention benefit. This is for qualified suppliers. So this is basically very similar to PEAK. For qualified suppliers only. They can retain up to 65% of the payroll taxes to be paid for their employees each year that they meet the requirements of the Act, up to a period of 10 successive years. Section 5, pages 13 to 14, this is the section that addresses the reimbursement of annual total payroll costs, and this is a benefit for the qualified firm, not the qualified supplier. So total payroll costs, there's a definition for them on Section 1, page 4. Up to 10% of eligible total payroll costs may be reimbursed for up to 10 successive years. And then there's a fund that's set up in Section 6 that this benefit is paid from. The Secretary of Commerce pays this reimbursement from that fund. And again, that particular benefit is just for the qualified firm, the manufacturer, not the qualified supplier. Section 6, like I said, sets up the fund. Section 7 is another benefit. This is a training and education expense reimbursement benefit. This benefit is available to both the manufacturer, the qualified firm, and a qualified supplier. Eligible expenses again, are defined in Section 1, page 5. Reimbursement for the eligible training and education expenses may be up to 50% for new employees each year for up to 5 successive years. There's a maximum limit with respect to this benefit of $5 million per business per year. And again, the maximum number of years that it may be taken is 5 successive years. Reimbursements are made by the Secretary from another fund that's set up in the bill, and that is found at Section 8. Section 9 it allows a property tax exemption of 50% for real property that constitutes a new manufacturing property or new headquarters that's owned either by the qualified firm or qualified supplier, and that's located and participating in a foreign trade zone program. This exemption only applies for as long as the manufacturing operations or headquarters operations continue. And again, this is also limited to the industries that I mentioned earlier with respect to the definition of a qualified firm. But a headquarters facility does not have those limitations, just like with respect to the definition of a qualified firm. Or rather, the definition of headquarters for other purposes of the bill. The qualified firm or qualified supplier has to be in compliance with the requirements of the bill, and also in the case of a qualified firm, that, the manufacturer or a headquarters, it has to be a $1 billion investment requirement. Qualified supplier, as I mentioned previously, does not have a minimum investment requirement. Section 10 allows a sales tax exemption for construction materials and services for constructing the facility. Section 11 is a section that provides some reporting requirements. That's on page 18. Requires annual reports from the Secretary of Commerce to the governor. This committee, the House Commerce Committee, the reports are to include the names, location, and description of benefit recipients, economic impact of the business operations, the number of new employees hired and wages, their wages, the level of wages, the annual and cumulative amount of investment, the annual amount of each benefit provided, and the estimated net state fiscal impact, and an estimate of the multiplier effect on the Kansas economy of the benefits awarded. In addition, the Secretary of Commerce must transmit a quarterly report to the chairpersons of the Senate and House Commerce Committees on the number of projects that may qualify for the incentive. So that's an additional reporting requirement that just goes to the chairpersons. Section 12 just amends 793606 to add that sales tax exemption. This bill is effective upon publication in the Kansas Register. What the practical effect of that is that the sales tax exemption is available right away upon publication in the Register, basically. So with that, I hope that that's been reasonably clear, and I would be happy to entertain questions.
Thank you, committee. Questions for Charles? Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How many other states have this?
I'm sorry, sir, I wouldn't be able to answer that. Perhaps Commerce may know.
Okay. Second, one more. I saw on our agenda you're maybe going to work a bill Friday or our next meeting. This is what you're going to plan on working this week, is it?
We're going to try to work it as soon as we can after hearing.
Okay, it's a lot to swallow.
It is a lot to swallow. Agreed, Senator.
Yeah.
Other questions? Senator Stephan.
Thank you. Help me understand the definition of secretary's discretion and where it's in section 3, I know. Help me understand what that means and where are the different locations within the bill that it shows up and why.
Okay. So as to the why, I think I would defer that to the Secretary of not the Secretary of Commerce, to the Department of Commerce in their presentation with respect to why. As far as where it shows up, there is basically in almost every benefit, the Secretary has discretion to set both the number of years that the benefit can apply and also, the percentage of the respective benefit. The exception would be the real property tax exemption for a qualified firm or qualified supplier with respect to the foreign trade zone program. So that there's that exception. That's just a 50% real estate property tax exemption. But pretty much everything else, there is discretion. And again, it's the Secretary needs to apply the factors that I mentioned, and they're set out in Section 3 with respect to making those determinations. And as far as why, I will leave that to the Department of Commerce to explain.
Very good. Again, from a legal standpoint, help me understand what the boundaries of discretion means. And also, in your explanation there, there's no chronological boundaries on some of his decision-making? As to how long these benefits could go on in certain circumstances?
So I believe in Section 2, it sets out the requirement, and I guess I should have mentioned that, so my apologies, I didn't mention that. One of the requirements for every credit, for every benefit, is that the firm has to engage in an agreement with the secretary. And the terms, the requirements of the act, and of course, other requirements that the secretary may make on the business are to be included in that agreement, and that's set out in Section 2. So, you know, the anticipation would be that the level of benefits, the percentages, the number of successive years would be established in the agreement, would be established at that time. You know, now, I guess in any economic development situation, I suppose, you know, there are times when perhaps a secretary renegotiates of commerce. That's something they can explain. But, you know, if the firm doesn't meet the requirements in the agreement or the requirements of the act, you know, there are clawback provisions. They have to pay back the benefits. The manufacturer has to make the investment in 5 taxable years. They have to, you know, make a substantial completion of the facility within a period of time, or they got to pay that bond. So there are like clawbacks and safeguards with respect to the benefits. Did that answer your question, sir? Okay, I want to answer your question.
I appreciate the attempt very much. So the bottom line is there in several, or at least one circumstance, the secretary has the sole discretion to grant benefits and exemptions in perpetuity. No, there's nothing in perpetuity. Each benefit has a limit. I mean, I guess the benefit that would have the longest potential time frame would be the real estate property tax credit, because that can continue as long as the operations of the manufacturer there or the headquarters there that are active in that foreign trade zone program continue. So potentially, that could be a long time. But the other benefits are limited in the number of years they apply.
Anything else, Senator? Other questions? Yes, Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This appears to be, as Senator Dahl mentioned, a lot to swallow, but it appears to be companies that come to Kansas or significantly expand in Kansas. Is that correct?
In a sense, yes. The definition of qualified business facility includes the possibility that, you know, perhaps a firm that was coming in that was going to make $1 billion investment, they could maybe, you know, purchase or take over a facility that is already there, but they still have to make $1 billion investment within 5 taxable years. So I'm going to your term expand. So, and yeah, I mean, if there was a company in Kansas that wanted to do this, they could do this. If there was a company outside of Kansas that wanted to do this, they could do it.
And Madam Chair, one more question. And that is, you mentioned in your briefing, and again, I haven't read the entire, how many page bill it is yet, but the words refundable tax credit. That can be up to, it looked like in portions, 100%.
Yeah, so the way that works is the portion of the tax credit, and again, it's split up into 3. The portion of the tax credit has to first be applied against the firm's tax liability. If there's any, for that year. If there's any left over, then that amount is refundable in the discretion of the secretary. And again, that's set out in the agreement of 50%, it's kind of a minimum, up to 100%. So obviously, if the installment, if, you know, they've got a, if the firm has something left over from applying the credit to their tax liability and it's 100% refundable, then, you know, they're going to get a refund every year for that earned tax credit.
Which would mean they pay zero taxes if it's all refunded.
Correct.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions? Senator Steffen.
Help me understand the qualified supplier, and that's kind of, we've got with this entity, the manufacturer, now we've got these satellite entities, and I don't think that's something I've heard of before. Help me understand that again, and who they are, what they are, and what their benefits are in this, please.
Certainly. If I could just kind of respond to your question again. I hope I didn't misspeak. So the credit gets first applied to tax liability, right? So if they have a tax liability and it's more than the credit, then they got to pay. If they have a tax liability and it's less than the credit, then if 100% of the refundable, if 100% of the credit is refundable, then they get that refundable amount up to the amount of the tax credit. So just to clarify, did that clarify?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think as we get into the conferees and further discussions, some of these things will be cleared up, and because we're kind of putting you on the spot to help us to understand the entire bill here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, now, Senator Steffen's question, do you recall that? Okay, yes.
So with respect to the qualified suppliers, and yeah, so you wanted sort of just how that fits in, or?
Sure, and what the bill says they are, who they are, what they get. Just basically run down, help me understand. That's kind of a new phenomena to my understanding.
Yeah, and so, you know, a part of the intent of the bill is to develop, you know, a supply network, a supply chain, ideally in Kansas for the manufacturing facility. So the definition of qualified supplier, basically it is a firm that, you know, provides provides, you know, components to the manufacturer, a supplier of components, subassemblies, chemicals, or other process-related tangible goods. So a supplier to the manufacturer. And it can really be any business. The definition in this bill, I think you may be seeing a change to that. The definition. Well, let's just talk about this bill. So in this bill, it means you know, it has to be a firm that's located in Kansas. It has to be you know, basically any business entity. It can be a firm that is a business outside of Kansas, a wholly owned subsidiary of a foreign corporation, if it does primarily most of its business is done in Kansas. So that's the scope right now of the qualified supplier. And again, the idea is sort of to create a supply network in Kansas. So, you know, that's where those requirements come in. One, it has to be selected by the qualified firm as one of 5. There are only 5 that can be selected. And secondly, it has to make that $10 million annual sales to the manufacturing facility or the headquarters facility. So I guess the concept is to, make benefits available to those qualified suppliers for the purpose of developing a supply chain in Kansas that supports the manufacturing facility. Did that clarify it at all?
Other questions? So I do have a quick question. Is there anything in this bill that prohibits the layering on of other incentives other than the foreign trade zone?
Yes, good point, Chairperson Erickson. So firms that take advantage of this program are not eligible for the other major Department of Commerce programs like HPIP, PEAK, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. Any others? Senator Tyson?
Would that include star bonds and other programs? I don't know.
I don't
Pretty
believe-
vague response.
I don't believe star bonds are specifically mentioned.
So they could qualify for other commerce programs then.
I might have to check the specific language, but I think the language specifically references those programs and isn't like a broad and any other program. So my answer is going to be yes, they could, but subject to check.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we will move on to the proponents. Thank you very much, Charles. First up, we have Paul Hughes, Deputy Secretary of Commerce. Welcome to committee, Paul.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Is it okay if I remove my mask? Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Paul Hughes, Deputy Secretary of Commerce, and thank you for allowing me to testify this morning in support of SB 347, APEX, as we call it. The Kansas Department of Commerce requests that the Kansas Legislature move swiftly to create a new economic development tool, APEX, attracting powerful economic expansion to permit the state to compete for a significant business currently evaluating the state, and to enable us to pursue similar opportunities in the future. We're competing for what's known as a mega project, which is an economic development opportunity where this company will be spending $1 billion or more on their facility and equipment. Though they cannot give certain details due to the confidentiality requirements, we can say that Kansas is a finalist for a mega project, surviving an elimination process of 69 other sites in the country. We are down to the final 2. This mega project will bring in $4 billion of new investment to our state, create 4,000 permanent jobs with an average wage of $50,000, which is above the county median. These are quality jobs, and add nearly 6,000 more jobs during the construction phase. I'll describe later how the suppliers for mega projects potentially create thousands more jobs in the wake of a mega project. These very large economic development opportunities are becoming more common as manufacturing is reshoring to the United States from overseas, and supply chains are deliberately being shortened. The global economy is rapidly changing, and Kansas must strengthen its toolkit to be more competitive in landing these mega projects, which is the goal of APEX 2022. Looking back 5 years, since 2017, Kansas has been considered for 11 mega projects, that $1 billion threshold. None of them have materialized in the state. Mega projects present a huge opportunity to grow our state, and APEX 2022 was developed in response to feedback that has been collected over the past 5 years regarding the competitiveness of the state of Kansas ecosystem in attracting mega projects. By way of significant capital investment, job creation, training budgets, and infrastructure enhancements, these mega projects represent a unique opportunity to bolster the workforce, establish new industrial sectors in the state, and deliver a more diverse tax base across Kansas. One mega project now being pursued by the state involves a massive advanced manufacturing facility created through a $4 billion private investment And the company is committing to creating 4,000 jobs and the average wage of $50,000. In order to compete for this and future opportunities, Apex 2022 was predicated on the successful concepts from existing incentive programs offered by the state, specifically the framework of Promoting Employment Across Kansas, or PEAK, High Performance Incentive Program, which is HPIP, and the Kansas Industrial Training Program, or KIT, you'll hear it referred to. And these were combined and modified to meet the unique needs of a mega project and their suppliers. Mega projects qualifying firms in Apex 2022 and their qualified suppliers are both addressed in the bill. Suppliers are included because we don't want these companies to be poached by neighboring states. There are other business reasons for including the suppliers as well. I'd be happy to address that later. There are several key components in the bill for qualifying firms and qualifying suppliers. In the bill, the mega projects are defined as qualifying firms with $1 billion investment, which may include assets that they own in other states being relocated to the state. And mega projects must be for-profit business establishment subject to state income, sales, or property tax that is engaged in one or more of the following targeted industries: advanced manufacturing, aerospace, distribution, logistics, and transportation, food and agriculture, professional and technical services, or as the national corporate headquarters of a for-profit business establishment. You'll find these same businesses indicated in the state's framework for growth. Qualifying suppliers may include no more than 5 suppliers for the components, subassemblies, chemicals, and other process-related tangible goods with sales to the qualifying firm of $10 million or more annually. The eligibility for much of the program benefits begin after the qualifying firm's facility has commenced operations. So we want to see completion of the building. The exception being the abatement of construction material taxes for suppliers. Naturally, they're going to be building and incurring those taxes at the onset of the project. Qualifying suppliers must then be selected by the qualifying firm and approved by the Secretary of Commerce to be eligible to receive these benefits. The incentives for qualified firms are as follows. In the investment tax credit of up to 15% of qualified business investment. So for clarity, we'll be talking about 50% or 100%. It's of that 15% credit that they've earned on their investment. Up to 10% of total Kansas payroll refund for up to 10 years. Up to $5 million of annual reimbursement of the employee training costs, or 50% of the eligible expenses. A property tax exemption of 50% for qualified firms that are located in a foreign trade zone and eligible and participating for a foreign trade zone program, and a 100% sales tax exemption for construction materials. The qualified suppliers is substantially the same, the investment tax credit of up to 15%. The important difference is that this is where we modeled on the PEAK program, that they could retain up to 65% of their payroll withholding tax for up to 10 years. Currently, that allows, under that program, up to upwards of 100% currently of their withholding. What we're doing here is we're pulling back on the suppliers and using them to help offset the cost of the program. Up to $5 million annually in reimbursement for the eligible training expenses, a 50% property tax exemption if the supplier is also engaged and eligible for the foreign trade zone program, and 100% exemption on the construction materials. Consistent with Secretary Toland's longstanding position on clawbacks, it's essential that there be meaningful safeguards to protect taxpayers in the event that any business has received incentives fails to uphold its agreement with the state. Accordingly, the Apex bill has been drafted with the following accountability measures. The state will claw back all benefits received by a qualifying firm or supplier if it does not meet the requirements set forth in the agreement with the state. Some of the requirements in the agreement include a number of jobs, the capital investment, and a number of other commitments by the project. All incentives issued to a qualifying firm or supplier will be published on the Incentive Transparency Database, located at ks.gov /transparency. The state will require the mega project to purchase a bond if the business falls below an investment grade rating. This bond will ensure the completion of the facility's shell. Annually in January, the Department of Commerce will report to the Legislature on the performance of all companies awarding incentives under the APEX program. The Department of Commerce will report to the Commerce Chair on a quarterly basis the number of mega projects currently being pursued by the state. That's our pipeline of projects that are evaluating the state. And local governments must approve the property tax exemption for qualified firms and suppliers. It's reasonable to ask, why aren't the state's current incentives good enough to win mega projects? There are many reasons for this. First, other states have already enacted legislation that is far more attractive than what Kansas currently offers. That's made it possible for decisions like Blue Oval, Ford, to go to Kentucky and to Tennessee. It allowed Samsung to go to Texas and allowed Gulfstream to go to Arizona. Second, mega projects are unique in that the amount of capital being invested by the company can far outweigh the company's tax liability for the first decade or so of operation. Their depreciation is so large that they don't have a tax liability. And in Kansas, that'll make it difficult for the companies to redeem more than this particular company we're referring to make it difficult for them to redeem more than 43% of the investment tax credits that we offer through the current HPIP program. And therefore, the site selectors and the company are treating the value as zero. We must do better if we want to compete with the Arizona and the Tennessees of the world. And third, in a changing economy, the business of modernizing our state economic development tools is an evolving process that must flow parallel with evolving industries. We cannot rest on past accomplishments being content with the past 2 record-setting years and think that our recent past performance is enough to compete in the future. It's not. We can't trail our competitors and accept an eventual 12th loss of a mega project. We have to beat them in the race for a new business investment and new jobs. The Commerce team has thoroughly analyzed our current incentives, compared our incentives to what other states offer specifically to mega projects and suppliers, and work to maximize the return for Kansas taxpayers. For example, the decision to propose the bill as 65% withholding tax rebate for 10 years for qualified suppliers best satisfies both these benchmarks. We reduced what the payout was to the supplier, and we shortened the timeline that they're eligible to receive those. This rebate would allow Kansas to offer a similar dollar amount to a standard peak offer, but would take longer to maximize. So while the supplier would not receive the benefit as quickly, the total offer would be competitive, and the other benefits of Apex would offset the delayed incentive. Also, the reduction from a standard 95% withholding rebate to a 65% rebate would help recover some of the costs associated with attracting the mega project. And lastly, it's important to note that the revenue generated from the qualified suppliers will be used to offset the education and training expense, as well as the total payroll refund offered to the mega project. Both the current mega project that Kansas is pursuing and future projects have the potential to transform the state's economy for the better, and it will provide good paying jobs that will help keep our talented young people in the state. I call it a talent surplus when we see graduating students leaving the state for opportunity. In this case, the current opportunity is estimated to create a total direct and indirect and induced economic impact of the current mega project is over $2.5 billion annually. Time is of the essence. This company is making their decision in February to make an announcement in March on their final location. I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to testify, and I urge the committee to enact Senate Bill 347 into law before the end of January. Be happy to take any questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And before we open for questions, committee, I do want to tell you that I agree with Senator Dahl and the other committee members. This is a lot to take in. We will not rush the testimony nor the question. I want the committee to have time to answer that. We'll go till our committee time at noon today, and if need be, we will continue hearing tomorrow so that committee members do get their questions answered. So questions for Paul. Yes, Senator Ware.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So getting $4 billion in investment for and 4,000 jobs, and that all sounds amazing. Where do those numbers come from? How are we estimating those numbers?
So those estimates come directly from the company. It's part of our process that as they're describing the project to us, they understand that in any state that they're shopping the project, that those are standard questions that are asked in order to be eligible for whatever incentive programs are in any state that they're evaluating. So that comes directly from the client. It's not an estimate. That is their projection on the growth that they're doing. Truthfully, they've been open with us and have shared that they have expansion plans that would be right on the heels on the completion of this project. So those are conservative numbers.
Cool. And so is this, they've committed to these amounts?
Yes, that will be committed into the agreement that they enter into with the state. That is a firm commitment.
I have another question, but it can wait if you want.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sandra.
So I see here, and I am not pretending to understand this by any means, so I'm asking, the only place that I'm seeing 100% of tax exemption is on construction costs. Is that accurate?
That's accurate on the construction cost. And then there's the discretion of the secretary on some of the tax rebates or refundable tax credits allowable to go up to that 100%.
Of 15%?
Correct.
So it's maximum 15%?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
It's difficult to describe and it's easy to misunderstand, so thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. You mentioned that a county will benefit. What county would benefit?
We can't describe the county where this project is going to be located yet because the land contract has not been completed. We still have a ways to go on this project. The signing of this into law gives us the tool we need to continue with the conversation. But this deal is not completed. It is not hinged just on this. There are still many floating variables out there.
So may I, Madam Chair? Thank you. So in the bill, it says that the facility was required, so the facility has to be purchased prior.
I'm sorry, Senator Tyson, can you read what section you're referring to?
2, line 37, section B.
Page 2, section B.
As if such facility was required, so it's speaking in past tense.
I'm seeing such facility for the use of the qualified firm. Is that what you're reading, Senator Tyson?
Yes.
Okay. So what we're discussing is the facility. And in the agreement mentioned earlier for Senator Ware was the agreement to build the facility. And in not only is it the capital and the investment and the job description, but it's also a square footage description of the building. So what they're referring to is what the client is committing to in building it. It's this project is so large, there is no existing 3 million square foot building in Kansas.
If I may, Madam Chair, thank you. I just, I find it interesting that you come to us asking for over $1 billion or at $1 billion cap, and you can't disclose what county, you can't disclose what company. It just seems, we used to talk about the back room, shady, smoky, smoke-filled room deals, and this appears to be along those lines. I think taxpayers We are here to be transparent, and this goes against the grain,
So,
Madam Chair.
May I
Yes.
respond, Madam Chair?
Yes.
So Senator Tyson, it is standard practice in all of economic development to keep the identity of the firm that's making that kind of investment from the public. It would cause financial harm to the company if the word got out that they were planning this. It would cost them customers, it would cost them suppliers if word of this was not controlled in some way. It's not in our interest to not be transparent. We're prohibited from sharing their name because we are under an NDA with this client. So we're happy to provide their intention on job growth and capital investment. And by virtue of the investment, there are very few companies that can make $1 billion investment like this. And by virtue of the industries that we're talking about, it's the framework for growth that identifies meaningful jobs and meaningful work and powerful contributions to the community. But I regret that I can't share the specifics on this client. I'm prohibited from doing so.
Senator Tyson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, as a legislator, mine is about transparency and full disclosure. And I understand business and finding non-disclosures, but you're coming to the public and asking for taxpayer dollars. I would also, you made a comment about this being $1 billion company and that there are clawbacks in the bill. Well, if the company goes belly up, there's nothing to claw back.
Senator Tyson, Madam Chair, in the bill, there's a discussion around a completion bond. And it's those companies that, for lack of a better term, are marginal, that fall into that space. That's why that's there, is we share the concern when you have a 3 million square foot building that's 3/4 complete. Who has the appetite for completing that? So there are protections to the downside here that it's why that we have the performance bond there. It's the reason that the suppliers can't collect most of their incentives until the project is completed. So we're doing what we can with the tools that are available to do that. I don't envy your position at all. You're in a position today where you have to choose between forwarding and approving Senate Bill 347, or we return to our standard practice, which is 0-11 and will become 0-12 without this kind of tool. And so I don't envy your position.
Madam Chair, may I?
Senator Tyson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I find that quite interesting because that argument has been used now for HPIP, STAR bonds, PEAK, all of the incentive programs that we ever hear about. That's the end-all, be-all that is going to save the state. And as the legislature, not we, as the legislature tends to develop these programs and put them out there, and commerce executes, I find it difficult, especially with my existing businesses, my existing constituents that are trying to make ends meet, and all we're worried about is enticing new business, not taking care of our own, who's currently in the state. And I understand we want the new business too, but we need to take care of both. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And along those lines of Senator Tyson, I do have a question. Something you said kind of made me process this a little bit. You said one of the reasons we're offering some incentive to suppliers is we don't want them poached by neighboring states. So what are we doing to keep existing businesses in Kansas that we would say are qualified firms under this bill so that a Texas or Florida or any other state wouldn't take a look at our bill and up the ante to lure our existing businesses to their state. I mean, that's essentially what we're doing, is we're luring existing businesses from other states by incentivizing it. What's to stop a state from, what are we doing to keep our businesses here so they don't get poached by another state with an apex-like bill?
Madam Chair, thank you for that question. So it was a part of the discussion around suppliers for the project. When a large company like this relocates, a vendor change is difficult for them. And so the expectation was that some would come, but not all. So when we were crafting this, we were being very careful to allow suppliers that are currently in the state to be eligible for this program. So if they become a supplier to this mega project and have sales of $10 million a year or more, they would be eligible for this program. So we're integrating the suppliers that are already here as potential suppliers to the project. But we're also understanding that some of the suppliers are going to come with this project because when it's a key supplier, it's very difficult to go through a vendor change at the same time they're starting a new facility.
Okay, thank you. And a quick follow-up, why 5? Was there a reason why the qualifying firm can select only up to 5 suppliers? Is there a reason for that specific number?
We really wanted to limit the number of participants in this program. We recognize that it's an exceptional business case, and we still have the other tools that are available. What we felt was that by limiting that to 5, it created a requirement on the project to make a conscientious decision which suppliers are going to be eligible for this project. We didn't want it to be so open-ended that it could be on $1 billion project. There could be 25 projects that would be eligible for this. And so that was intended to really put a curb on preventing the program from having any sort of runaway provision in there.
Okay, yes, Senator Dole.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a little bit outside of my box on this, but I can recall, I believe, I wasn't here at the time, that we gave, I think the company was Boeing, a lot of incentives. And then once, they got their incentives, they left. Do we have a guarantee that we bring these things in? Do they have a 50-year contract or something that they don't get these things and then they bail out on us?
Senator Dole, it's a very insightful question there, because that piece of legislation also had a moniker attached to it, and it comes to knowing who it was written for. It became known as the Boeing bill, and Boeing took that moniker as damage to their brand. Returning to Senate Bill 347. What the provisions that are in here, in the agreement with the state, they're committing to the number of jobs that they're creating and how long those jobs need to remain in the state. They're also making a commitment on training. So the training dollars that we're putting towards this program are essentially a match. So they're making an investment in the community, we're making an investment in the community. In some instances, especially on these really large projects, the workforce doesn't exist. It's a new industry, it's a new vertical that's coming to the state. And so we're literally changing the makeup of the workforce. So what happens in these instances is they start attracting other similar companies to the state. So to your question, do we have a requirement in there that's built into the agreement that they need to make their investment, not only the amount of the investment, but within constraints, within a certain number of years that they need to make the investment. And the same is true for the job growth aspects of the project. So those are written into the agreement with the state. It varies depending on the industry and the size of the project, but those kind of provisions are in the agreements.
Senator Stephan, and then committee will need to move on to get some other conferees, but Senator Stephan.
Thank you. Let's look at this from a strategic standpoint.
Yes, sir.
There's an opportunity. There's lots of tools in your toolbox that are already in existence. You know, we haven't been given anything that shows how applicable existing programs are. You know, bottom line is we've been dropped with a 55-page bill and we've been told, take it or leave it, do or die. I usually don't look at business decisions that way. I look at what my options are. Have you all prepared any sort of a document to help us walk through what the options are for this opportunity? Or really, is this the only opportunity and it goes away? Because I would certainly think about a discussion. You know, when you named off some of the companies and states they've gone to, it's very striking that you hit on a lot of no income tax states. And that's clearly a huge draw for a state to recruit new business. So I would think on our strategic opportunities, we could put, what can we do what do we have, a 7% corporate income tax rate? Just incredibly high. Could we not be strategizing to lower our corporate tax rate? What are opportunities that benefit everybody and not just a single company? We're looking at this through an incredibly narrow lens, and we're kind of being sold that it's do or die. And I don't function that way in my life, my business life. Can you help us develop more of a strategic plan on what our options are in regards to this?
Absolutely. A little bit more about the no income tax states as well. What you'll find in the no income tax states, especially Texas, in my former life coming from Arizona, we had taxes out there, relatively high property taxes as well, and income taxes. Texas is difficult to compete with, but they have very high property tax rates. So while they don't have an income tax or even a corporate income tax in Texas, they have very high property taxes. That gives them more to work with when they're talking about the incentives on property tax. That's where you'll find their incentives is on property tax. And so they still have an economy to pay for, as do we. When we constructed this, it was in the interest of time. It wasn't intended to remove options or discussion. But we have gotten feedback from these mega projects of what works and what doesn't. And that's what makes up the construct of Senate Bill 347.
Follow-up.
Yes, if it's quick, thank you.
Thank you. Overnight, can you produce a document that shows the programs we have and how they could be applied to this opportunity, so we could have a better idea of what our options are?
Certainly, Senator. For purposes of clarity, would you like for us to illustrate why a program is, I made a remark earlier about why one program is being valued as zero. Do you want us to illustrate that as part of this workup? Why it's valued as zero?
Sure, but I want to see how, when you take the programs we have existing and how, when you apply them to this opportunity, what it looks like.
Okay. Yes.
And I'd like to see what some other options are.
Committee, I'm sure that Mr. Hughes will be happy to be around or accessible for additional questions. So if you do have additional questions that didn't get asked today, please let us know. We'll make sure we get that information. Are there any conferees that cannot be here tomorrow? If so, I want to make sure we give you an opportunity. Yes. Ma'am. Will you step forward, please? And
Am I excused, Madam Chair?
yes, thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. And will you state your name and organization, please?
My name is Ann Smith-Tate. I am the President and CEO of the Shawnee Chamber of Commerce and the Executive Director of the Shawnee Economic Development Council. Chairman and member of the
committee.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes to come up here and talk in support of Senate Bill 347. As the president of the Chamber and Economic Development Council, we regularly have the opportunity to see projects come through our state that can perhaps alter the trajectory of our community, our region, and our state as a whole. And many times we see those opportunities pass us by. As the Deputy Secretary said, in the past 5 years, we've seen 11 such projects come through the state, all of which have chosen other states to invest in and to grow in. And those opportunities that we see lose are significant opportunities to grow our economy and provide a better life for our families and to help us to continue to build a state that is a great place to live and a good place to work and a secure place to raise our children. You know, the simple fact is that economic development is, in today's global economy, we are consistently competing with regions and states that are upping their game, that are working hard to attract companies such as the one we're discussing today and other mega projects. And if we as a state are not going to keep pace and keep competitive, then we are simply just not going to continue to be able to be at the table when these crucial deals are put together and the major expansions are decided. The Apex legislation is not just a good deal for the company and the community which they choose, where it locates, but it does have the power through the supplier piece of this legislation to leverage their company suppliers and supply chain to locate in Kansas as well, and will bring, as mentioned before, an estimated direct and indirect benefit to the state of $2.5 billion annually. These deals do not come along every day. You know, I've spent nearly 20 years in economic development, and I've worked to attract investment on both sides of the state line, Kansas and Missouri. And I understand that sometimes incentives get complicated, they are misunderstood or maligned, but the fact of the matter is it is necessary to get these deals done. And the Apex legislation that is in front of you today has made a very strong and good faith effort to provide accountability and transparency, all which are hallmarks of good public-private partnerships. This incentive package could be the game changer that we so desperately need. As we've seen in the reports recently done by the state, we are losing population, and we're losing on the fact that companies are choosing other states, Arizona, Texas, Tennessee, Missouri, sometimes, to make that investment. I'm confident that the support for this legislation and this initiative is broad and deep among those of us who are advocating for economic development for the state as well as the business community. I encourage you and ask for your support in moving this legislation forward so that we are able to secure this deal and other mega projects in the future as we take a step forward towards building a stronger and sounder Kansas economy for all of us. Again, I really thank you for your time and your consideration of this bill.
Thank you. We're going to have any of the other conferees who cannot be here tomorrow go ahead and testify, and then we'll open up for questions. If you can stick around, Dan?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Other conferees, I saw another hand. Yes, sir. If you'll come forward and state your name and occupation and the organization you represent.
Hello, my name is Steve Kelly. I'm the Vice President for Economic Development for Lawrence Chamber and EDC of Douglas County.
Welcome, Steve. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Chairwoman Erickson, Vice Chair Steffen, and members of the Senate Commerce Committee. Good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak in support of Senate Bill 347, otherwise known as the Apex Bill. My name is Steve Kelly, and I currently serve as Vice President of Economic Development for Lawrence Chamber and the Economic Development Corporation of Lawrence and Douglas County. I've worked in economic development for over 30 years at both the state and local level, and I've long believed that Kansas and Kansas communities, with the necessary tools in place, can be successful and can compete effectively with other states, countries for the types of economic development projects that can have significant impact on both a region and a state. Kansas currently has a realistic opportunity to land what can only be described as a mega project, with thousands of direct jobs and additional opportunities for related industries and suppliers to also locate significant numbers of jobs in proximity to the primary site. In addition, it is projected that capital investment in the primary site alone could be on the order of $4 billion. Clearly, this is an exceptional and exciting opportunity for the entire state, and one that will require an aggressive effort for us to effectively compete. Senate Bill 347, now under consideration in this committee, provides a set of tools via enhancements of many existing programs to successfully land this special opportunity. It would also provide a standing mechanism to support other opportunities of similar magnitude as they occur in the future. This legislation has the potential to have a meaningful positive impact on the economic fortunes of our state. We encourage the committee's strong support and timely passage of Senate Bill 347. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Steve. Other conferees who cannot be here tomorrow? Okay. Welcome. Please state your name and organization.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you again. Members of the committee, my name is Andrew Nave. I am the Executive Vice President of the Greater Wichita Partnership, a regional economic development organization representing the 9 counties around Sedgwick. Thank you for the time to speak to this bill today. I will reiterate and echo the comments from the Deputy Secretary that on behalf of the Greater Wichita Partnership, we wholly believe this tool is absolutely needed to enhance our toolbox. And partly because, obviously, all of us, everyone wants Kansas to be the most competitive that we can be. But there has been a significant shift in economic development over the last number of years. I've done this job for 17 years. I was in Johnson County for many years of that. And I've noticed, and many of my colleagues in the room have noticed, a shift of these mega projects. As an example, looking at our numbers, and I know a lot of us have kind of rattled off statistics at you all, we have been tracking projects and certainly mega projects over the years. From 2018 to 2020 in the Wichita region, we had 2 projects that would be considered of this program's criteria, $1 billion of investment, 2 mega projects. Spirit Aerosystems was one of those. In the last year, in 2021, we had 5. Now, 2 of those have been eliminated from our region. We're still in competition on 3 others, 2 that are manufacturing, 1 that's a data center, and I think the data center is a little bit of a long shot. But it shows you that something has shifted in our economy, in our global economy, that these projects are more prominent now than they used to be. And as the Deputy Secretary referenced, other states and other places are winning these projects. These are landing somewhere. And it's, I think, incumbent upon us as leaders of the state and as economic developers in the state to put our state forward. Our state reputation matters, notoriety matters, momentum matters, and especially as it comes to, there's so many factors and facets of this that are important, but talent, workforce development, I know is a key topic that you all are looking at this year, and talent recruitment and talent development is so critical. And I know that hearing from my employers, even my major employers in the Wichita area, we often hear from them the sensitivity about attracting new talent. But I would offer up for you that the premise, the paradigm that the rising tide lifts all boats applies to talent. That there's a reason, that many reasons, but one of the reasons that young professionals and talented professionals from all over the country and from the West and East Coast are flocking to the middle part of America, Kansas included, but absolutely to Texas and to Austin, is because month after month, quarter after quarter, there's an announcement like Texas Instruments or Samsung or Tesla, and that reputation builds a momentum. A mega project has that impact in our state. I love the innovation that you all's committee and that the Department of Commerce put into this bill to create some new components of this program. Senator Stephan, I think you're absolutely right that this has a new criteria around the supplier that's innovative, that makes an impact across our state. I can absolutely see a reality where a mega project lands somewhere in the state, maybe in Reno County, sir, and that there's a supplier in western Kansas in Finney County, and there's a supplier in Montgomery County, and there's often suppliers in geographic circumference to that mega project. This could have an impact across our state. And so if there are many reasons that, I know this is a lot of information, a lot to take in, but this is the kind of tool that helps change our economy. And so we highly encourage your support. I will be around for questions. I couldn't make it back tomorrow, so thank you very much for your time and committee members.
Are there any other conferees that, yes. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, Beth Johnson with the Overland Park Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Council.
Welcome, Beth.
Thank you. Chair Erickson and members of the committee, I am Beth Johnson, the Senior Vice President of Economic Development at the Overland Park Chamber of Commerce. I've worked in economic development in the state of Kansas for almost 20 years in 3 different communities representing rural, suburban, and metro areas. I'm also a past president and board member for the Kansas Economic Development Alliance, which I know you have a letter of support on this program from them as well. My career in Kansas has afforded me the opportunity to work on many different projects and to be an advocate for economic development programs that are vital to our competitiveness. The Overland Park Chamber has also consistently worked with this committee and others in the development of programs that increase transparency and assure the protection of taxpayers. This program is no different. But we've also consistently spoken about the importance of having tools in the toolbox. Economic development is a process of elimination, where site selectors and the companies they represent are looking for ways to eliminate your community and your state from contention. Our quality of life, cost of living, geographic location, skilled workforce, transportation access are all advantages. The tipping point in their evaluations is often incentives. Like them or not, they are a factor and a tool that is used by our competitors across the United States and globally. This bill creates an extraordinary incentive that will allow Kansas to compete for transformative projects. Projects that qualify for this type of incentive will benefit the community, the region, and the entire state. Projects of this magnitude don't come around often, but when they do, it is vital that we be creative and move quickly so that opportunities do not slip away. Creating this incentive will bolster our efforts to win extraordinary projects. Landing a project of this magnitude is transformative and puts Kansas on the national stage. We support this new program and hope you will support SB 347 as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Other conferees who cannot be back if we don't get to you today? Seeing none, do we have questions for Ann, Beth, Steve, or Andrew? Senator Stephan.
Thank you. For all of you, actually, do any of you all who just testified have specific knowledge as to this specific project? Okay. So we were talking in pretty round terms there. Okay. Number two, have any of you all ever testified against a new tool for the Commerce Department?
Any other questions for this? Yes, Senator Tyson.
Thank you. I would follow up with that. I have a situation where a major corporation is coming, not in my Senate district, but very close. And it's wonderful, it's great. But the interesting thing is I get a call from a small businessman, and he is extremely concerned because he cannot staff his business as it is now. And with this new business coming in, he's afraid that he's not going to be able to compete for employees. Have you, any of you, considered this scenario, and what would be your comment to it?
Yes, any of the conferees that have testified so far, please address that.
Madam Chair, Senator Tyson.
Would you please restate your name, please, for the record? Thank you.
I appreciate that. I'm Paul Hughes, Deputy Secretary for Commerce. Madam Chair, Senator Tyson, that has been evaluated as a part of this project coming into the state. The key thing here is it's a word, it gets used lightly, but we're talking about a transformative industry. And when I talked about workforce that doesn't exist for certain industries, we're not taking from industries that are currently out there. We're building a workforce that's not there currently. That's what makes this a powerful program under the training component.
Yes, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your comments. I can't debate something that I don't know. This is unknown to those of us that would not sign a non-disclosure. And full disclosure, the Department of Commerce came to my office today, just before this meeting, and offered that I could find out who the company is if I was willing to sign a non-disclosure. I just don't think that my constituents would accept that standard and that level for a legislator. I have grave concern over this. I feel like I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
This is Senator O'Shea. I'd love to, I don't know how to raise my hand online.
Okay, yes, Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been listening in. I'm struck by, I worked for the Greater Topeka Partnership before I had my business, and that includes economic development, chamber work. And, you know, it is unfortunate that we don't know where and we don't know the company. But if we were the kind of state that operated by disclosing that information, we would never attract any businesses, because that's, unfortunately, you can't disclose that information. So I'm just a little afraid that we are not not looking innovatively enough at this as an opportunity. And I would just encourage everyone to just understand a little bit more about how economic development works. Thanks.
Thank you, and hello, Leland. We hear you too. Okay, we do have Curtis Sneeden from Topeka. I do not want to rush you, sir, but we do have a little time, so we'd love to have your testimony. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Curtis Sneeden, President of the Greater Topeka Chamber of Commerce, and you'll be relieved to know, I think, that I won't need to take much of your time. The points of views which have been expressed are very parallel to what I would share with you. The Greater Topeka Chamber of Commerce is part of a larger organization called the Greater Topeka Partnership. It includes, among other organizations, our chamber and our economic development group here in town. It's called Go Topeka. So I have the pleasure of working literally side by side with the professionals in this town who are doing the sort of work we're talking about. They're working to attract new businesses here, and most importantly, they're working to help our existing businesses expand and pay attention to our small businesses to make sure that they've got the same type of opportunity to prosper. That's one downside to this conversation. It's exciting, but it's a little focused on this massive project, which is a good thing. But we wouldn't want this conversation to eclipse the fact that some of us on the ground spend a great deal of our time focusing on our existing companies and especially our small businesses. I will tell you that projects pass through our office every day that are exciting, and I don't get to know anything about them. That's the nature of economic development. I'm not one of the ones who signs a non-disclosure agreement, so I have to wait for announcements just like everyone else. But the deals that are worked through are nevertheless ultimately run through a crucible in this county that takes place at an intergovernmental body called the Joint Economic Development Organization, and ultimately the taxpayers' dollars are well stewarded. What I would tell you is that the reason I'm standing here, and I suspect some of the other chambers representatives standing here, is not necessarily because we think that we're eligible for the next $4 billion project. This is an exciting deal. And if it comes through, undoubtedly most of our communities will benefit in some corollary way, whether some of those suppliers, there'll be economic activity that has a big impact on a big part of the state. But the real point, I think, was summed up most succinctly by Mr. Nave. This is Kansas' opportunity to win and win big. And landing this project would send a message to the industry of site selectors and other professionals out there that Kansas is ready to compete at this high level. We don't necessarily think in terms of billion-dollar projects, but that isn't what's necessary to drive our future growth. We would fully expect that this project and the move you'd be making, the message you'd be sending with this legislation, would clarify for the entire country, if not the world, that Kansas needs a second look because we are ready to compete at that high level. For that reason, my friends at the Greater Topeka Partnership are very enthusiastic supporters of this bill, and we appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Curtis. We do have a question from Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Actually, my question would not be from any of the previous conferees or the most recent conferees, because I'm confident they are strictly advocating a position, not full knowledge of the legislation, and we are up against the clock. I could easily spend a decent amount of time, Madam Chair, but my understanding is we're going to come back to this tomorrow, and I'll ask the questions today or wait till tomorrow, just sort of laying it in your lap to direct me.
Due to the time, if you have several questions, I want to make sure that they are thoroughly answered. So if you're okay holding till tomorrow, we'll have more time to make sure your questions are answered.
I appreciate that. I will just make a couple brief comments. One, I have not decided, as probably most members on this committee, if this is good legislation or bad legislation. There's a lot to digest, but for the committee's benefit, really we're only talking, even though it's a 55-page bill, we're only talking basically an 18-page bill, but it does have 11 new sections in it because starting on page 18, we get into current statute in Section 12 that goes through a long list of sales tax exemptions, so that consumes most of the bill. But there are some specifics in the bill, particularly my questions will be directed to the Department of Commerce, but I will save those for tomorrow. But I just thought that for the benefit of the committee, since we just got this, I thought, well, we might want to consider the fact that read through page 18 and you've pretty much got the nut or the main things of the bill. But I'll look forward to tomorrow to asking some questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. We do have one more proponent who is in another committee. So Eric Stafford has submitted his testimony, and he said if he did not make it by the time we needed him, he has submitted his testimony. We do have one opponent. Mr. Trobert, are you able to join us tomorrow? I do not want to cut your opportunity short. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's flexibility. I know this is a heavy lift. Appreciate committee, your attention and time, and seeing no other business, we will adjourn for today.